Ms. Catherine Hickson. Ms. Catherine Hickson is a pre-doctoral research fellow with NASA, working under the Behavioral Health and Performance Division of Johnson Space Center. In this role, she's researching innovative methods for the delivery of team training programs for astronauts, focusing on the context of long-duration exploration missions. Additionally, Catherine is a PhD student studying educational technologies at the Graduate School of Computer and Information Sciences at Nova Southeastern University. Ms. Hickson specializes in the theories of design for web-based games, simulations, and virtual worlds to support learning.
As indicated, I'm going to be talking today about NASA. But first, a little bit of background about what I'm doing with NASA. So as you can see here, I'm looking at how the space environment can affect mental performance. Imagine your bathroom for a second. So I'm assuming probably none of you have massive, enormous bathrooms. So the average size bathroom. Now imagine you are in that bathroom with 5 to 10 other people for 2 months, stuck in just that bathroom. How would that make you feel? I see it. Yes, it's absolutely accurate. It can be very trying on people. You see, oh my gosh, I would go crazy. Yes, claustrophobic, most definitely. All of those things come into play. Depression, as we mentioned, the isolation, claustrophobia, not enough space. Oh yes, all of those are variables when looking at the deep space environment. So that's what I am studying right now. As you can see on the bottom, I mentioned that we use analogs to replicate space. Well, I'm sure all of you have heard of Antarctica, right? I'm sure all of you have heard of deserts, for sure. We do have a couple on there, though, that maybe you haven't heard of. So the top one, the NEMO, is what we call it. It's an underwater residential laboratory, and I included a picture there on the slide. Interestingly, this laboratory actually takes place off the Florida Keys, so it's fairly close to where we all are. So basically what we're doing is trying to replicate or mimic space here on Earth, because obviously it's a little difficult to try to study the effects of space while we're limited to an earthbound environment. So it's pretty cool, the different laboratories that we have. Specifically, the question that I look at is listed here on this slide. So, to prepare for long-duration space missions, what are the most effective ways to train astronaut teams? And by, again, replicating the environments of space, we're able to then figure out the various ways that we should be training them. So what I am doing in addition to my research, I'm a PhD student, so I'm in a doctoral program, and how this works is I am a fellow, a research fellow. So I am not yet a full-time, typical employee with NASA. Instead, they're supporting my doctorate work. So they've given me, a way to think of it as like a scholarship. But in exchange for the scholarship money for my tuition and a living stipend, I have to do quite a bit of work for them at Johnson Space Center over the summers. Good, yes. It's in Texas. Alabama, no, getting close. There are NASA space centers located all over the United States, and I'll actually get there in a second. But so, how did I end up in NASA? It's kind of funny because my background is about as opposite as you can possibly get from NASA. So as you can see, I studied journalism, I studied creative writing, and I was even a high school English teacher for several years. Oh, yes. So in my former life, I could have maybe been your teacher. But again, the question, how did I end up at NASA? It's such a wide difference in fields. You can see here I went from studying Shakespeare to working with people who wear really weird suits at work, as you can see from this picture. So for me, What it involved was these various keys to success. At the top, I put read, read, read. The thing is, through reading, you can learn about anything you want. Even if you're, say, terrible at physics. If you go out and buy a couple physics books, then you can definitely expand your knowledge in that area. So it's a great thing. Then I also put step outside of your comfort zone. So basically, what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to try something completely different from what you've ever done before. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you all, I was never that good at science. I was never that great at math, but I was able to overcome those deficiencies that I had through reading, through studying really hard, and basically kind of taking my education into my own hands. And that goes along with the next bullet point, which says if you have a gap in your knowledge, fill it. So whether you have to enroll in an extra course or participate in an outside of school activity or club, or again, buy a book about it. Don't just sit back and wait for the knowledge to appear in front of you. Go out and find it. And along with those same things, be persistent. Never, ever give up. Again, don't be afraid to try new things. So now that you've heard a little bit about me, let's look at working for NASA, what this might actually entail. Contrary to what a lot of people tend to focus on, NASA is not just space shuttles. We're not just astronauts. I mean, of course, it's a huge part of what NASA does, and definitely the most visible. But all of these things that are listed on this slide actually stem directly from NASA technology. Memory foam, yeah. That refers to different types of mattresses. Perhaps you've seen commercials for it before where you lay down and then the foam kind of meets your body, I guess. And then bowling balls, yeah. Isn't that crazy? Boomerangs, ski boots, hang gliders. And then one that I would think you guys would all be interested in is the cell phone cameras, right? We all love to be able to take pictures on our cell phones. Well, that stemmed from NASA technology. Pretty cool. So what types of jobs, though, actually exist at NASA? Well, again, we all know astronauts, right? But that is actually less than 1% of the total NASA workforce. The majority of positions at NASA are in these fields here: professional, engineering, and scientific. And I listed a couple at the bottom. Oh, biology. Yes, absolutely. These are our various ologies, really. Different engineering, different types of sciences, accounting even. Over 60% of NASA positions. The next category of NASA jobs is considered administrative or management. These are, I guess the behind the scenes of NASA. So those that are actually making the business side work. So you can see a budget analyst. That would be a lot of accounting, a lot of financial types of matters. Contract specialist. That refers to the idea of a bunch of NASA workers are considered contractors. So what that means is they don't necessarily have a permanent full-time position with NASA, but they're brought on for special projects. Well, since it is such a large part of the workforce, the contract specialists kind of oversee all of those people. So these are like, again, like the business types of jobs at 24%. The next one is considered administrative support, and this is 7% of NASA positions. This is secretaries, a clerk, management assistant, all of those things that ensure that the running goes smooth of the day-to-day operations. You see typist, that's me. Awesome. Another one is technical and medical support. This is 9%. So this is, engineering technicians, electronic technicians. These are the people who also have pretty incredible scientific backgrounds, but they're perhaps more office-based as opposed to being out in experiments or laboratories. And the last category is trades and labor. Again, these are people behind the scenes who are ensuring that the day-to-day operations go smoothly. But this is actually less than 1% of NASA positions. So I'll show you guys a pie graph here. Basically just represents exactly what I was just going over, which is that the engineering and scientific fields are by far the largest segment of the NASA workforce. But I think it's important to know that there are positions for nearly everyone at NASA because it is such a huge workforce. So whether it's, say, marketing, business, communications, of course the science, making robots, health, doctors, I mean, you name it, there's a chance that they work for NASA, or I should say those positions are available at NASA. And this, as I mentioned earlier, shows a map of all the different NASA locations. So you can see we do have a center here in Florida, Texas, which is Johnson, as I was already mentioning, 2 all the way out west in California, and they're kind of spread out all over the place. So basically, if you are interested in moving out of the state one day, there's opportunities for you, but then even in the state here in Florida, there's also opportunities. What's headquarters? I see a question there. The official headquarters of NASA is located basically around Washington, D.C., and it's the kind of executive board, I guess. So think of like how a business might have a chief executive officer, a CEO or a president, that type of thing. All of those leadership positions are located at headquarters. But with that being said, there's also leadership positions at every single center. So when I see another question, how does each NASA place do different things? So I'm going to go back to this map. They all specialize in different areas. Now, while their research very much overlaps, they do have different things that they focus on. So, for example, at Johnson, there in Texas, the focus is absolutely on the astronauts. If you are an astronaut going through the training, that is all going to take place there in Houston, Texas. The entire life cycle of training, which is actually 2 to 5 years. Whereas out in California, they have a center that's known as the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So they're focusing on kind of the high-stakes, high-speed issues associated with flying. So I'm going to go on here to courses. Well, as I was saying, you really can have almost any career you can imagine at NASA. So it's not quite as simple as saying, this is the exact career path you should take. More so it's about where your interests lie, right? But with that being said, if you want to be in that bucket where there's the majority of the workforce, as well as, incidentally, the highest paying jobs, which we'll get to in a second, these are definitely recommended courses. Now you can see at the bottom, I put English composition. Now, I know I'm a little biased because, like I said, I was a language arts teacher for several years. But it is, I think, primarily about the creativity and being well-rounded. Because while you will surely have a specialization as you continue your education, whether you're wanting to be a history major or an accounting major, an engineering major, you still need a very wide base of knowledge. And I mean, that's true of any career, really. You'll be put into situations where you have to think quickly on your feet and you have to talk about such a wide variety of topics, so that creativity and diversity in your studies is incredibly important. I see someone put here, I've always thought of NASA being so sophisticated. Is that true? No, I don't think so at all. I mean, it's really like any company, any employer you can think of. I mean, definitely, there are people who work at NASA whose intelligence is astounding. What they're able to accomplish, what they're researching is truly admirable. But there's also, a completely, I guess, kind of average people. And again, those are the ones who are behind the scenes who are actually making NASA operate. So there really is a place for anyone, which is one of the reasons why NASA is so cool. So a couple other thoughts, things you could do outside of school. And again, this applies to any career that you're considering, but specifically for NASA, you should be involved in various clubs and activities. So things like computer clubs, look into competitions. If you do a Google search for like robotic or robot competition, science competition, you could even type in what grade you're in. There are so many opportunities out there. Some have cash prizes, which is great. Everyone loves money, right? And some award perhaps like partial academic credit, or you get honored at a big ceremony. I mean, there's all sorts of cool things that you could be involved in. And another thing to consider is internships. And you can see here I put a picture. This is of an actual high school student who worked on that robot that's there in the background, which is amazing that he was able to do that for the summer. And it's kind of funny how there's a police car following him. So they had to make sure that, they were being completely safe and all of the, surrounding communities were aware of what was going on. But yes, it is big, very cool robot. So you can see here at NASA, there are all sorts of internships ranging from anywhere from 3 weeks to an entire year even. Summer internships are the most common. You can see where I put paid or unpaid, although most of them actually are paid, so that's a good thing, right? And then they can also help you out with housing. So, perhaps you want to be around Houston with your parents for the summer. Well, NASA can definitely help with that if you're selected for an internship. Or depending upon your age, you might be able to live in a dorm type of situation. Bottom line, there's so many opportunities. It's really cool. But my third bullet point here, you definitely have to have good grades. So I saw some internships where they listed a 2.5 GPA as a requirement, but I'd say the average that they're looking for is a 3.0. But at the same time, if you have that super well-rounded background, if you've been to different camps or done competitions or clubs, then they can usually negotiate a little bit with you on some of the other requirements. But bottom line, though, you definitely have to have good grades. So let's look at the money, right? That's what everyone always wants to know. The thing with NASA is that they assign salaries based upon pay grades. Pay grade is essentially a number. That number is based upon things like your years of experience, your degree, several kind of different factors. So these numbers that I have listed here are for entry-level pay. That means right when you graduate, what can you typically expect? And I also put at JSC, that's Johnson Space Center. Another kind of important thing to know is that the pay does depend upon location. So you might get a little bit more or a little bit less, depending where you're looking at. And then, I see a question. Is this per year? Yes, that is an annual salary. But then if you're in a specialized type of career, such as engineering or computer sciences, technologies, those are typically a little bit higher. And again, this is entry level, so right out the gate. So there's lots of room to grow with NASA. And then I put the astronauts entry level down on the bottom because I thought that was pretty interesting. And again, that's entry level. So if someone is accepted into the astronaut training program, that's what they could expect for their salary. Another thing, too, that's important is the levels of degree. So you can see in parentheses, I put BS, MS, PhD. Those refer to a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and then a doctorate degree. So obviously, the higher your education, the higher you could also then expect to be paid, which is pretty cool. So, my bottom line to you guys, my main advice to you, I've already mentioned the top one, definitely get good grades. As I was also mentioning, definitely participate in extracurricular activities, whether it's clubs, if you can do any types of sports or theater, any of those types of things help. And then as I also mentioned, diversify your studies. Have a focus, try to find something that really makes you passionate, that really interests you, but be sure to be really well-rounded also. And then last, I think most importantly, just have confidence in yourself. So I was saying at the very beginning, be persistent. Never give up. Just because you might think that you're not good at something doesn't mean that you actually are. Just keep trying. I mean, gosh, you saw how I went from studying journalism to working in computer sciences at NASA. It's a really big leap, but I was able to do that because I had faith in myself that I could learn, that I was capable of doing it. So, last are these various links. I did shorten them a little bit for you guys, so feel free to kind of jot them down. I know that these presentations will be posted through FLVS also, so feel free to go back and reference them. But again, Google is also a great friend. Just Google things, type in NASA careers or high school internships or whatever it might be that you're looking for. There are so many resources out there. You just have to start looking.